Morning sun cut through the massive windows of Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, painting the busy terminal in soft, golden light. The steady rumble of suitcase wheels muffled flight announcements, and a low murmur of conversations created the usual travel sounds. People drank coffee, flight attendants guided passengers, and families navigated crowds. It was just another morning. But in less than an hour, this normal scene would break apart, and an event would unfold that people would remember for years. Officer Liam Carter adjusted his badge as he led his elite K-9 unit through the South Terminal. 14 powerful German shepherds moved beside their handlers in perfect, quiet formation. This was a special security suite before an important diplomatic flight. Liam felt proud of his team's discipline. These animals were more than dogs. They were detection experts, each trained for specific threats like explosives, narcotics, and dangerous people. Together, they formed a strong wall of instinct, training, and loyalty. As they walked, Liam's own partner, a strong shepherd named Bolt, stayed a half-step ahead. His smart eyes scanned the crowd, his nose testing the air for any sign of danger. Passengers often stopped to stare, some smiling, others taking pictures. Liam understood. The dogs were a comforting symbol of safety. He allowed the attention, knowing it built public trust. Just then, his radio crackled. Unit Bravo, maintain sweep at South Terminal. Keep formation tight. VIP movement in 30. Copy that, command. Bravo unit proceeding, Liam answered, his voice calm. He had done this many times. Yet, a small change in Bolt's posture made him look down. The dog's ears twitched, and his intense look fixed on a waiting area near Gate B7. Liam followed his gaze. Nothing seemed wrong, just a janitor with a cart, tired travelers in chairs, and a small family by the window. Liam felt a faint, unexplainable prickle of unease, but pushed it aside. He gave a low, sharp whistle. Bolt immediately straightened, refocusing, his body once again the picture of obedient alertness. The unit continued its patrol, a moving wall of authority. None of them, not even Liam with all his experience, could have guessed that before the day ended, these perfectly trained dogs would ignore every command, surround one small child, and change many lives forever. The morning rush continued. The smell of coffee and cleaning products hung in the air. The rhythmic sound of departure boards flipping and the distant noise of a jet engine provided a constant background. But amidst all this movement, near Gate B7, something small and still stood out. A little girl, who couldn't have been more than 5 years old, stood completely alone next to an abandoned luggage cart. She wasn't crying or calling out. She was just still. In her arms, she clutched a faded, well-loved stuffed rabbit, holding it so tightly that her small knuckles were white. A small, clean bandage on her knee stood out against her pale skin. Officer Liam Carter noticed her almost by chance. His unit had just finished checking the nearby boarding area when a flash of bright yellow, her little raincoat, caught his eye. She stood frozen, a tiny statue under the bright terminal lights. There was something deeply unsettling about her complete stillness. Lost children usually cried or looked around with wide, scared eyes. This girl's calm was unnerving. Liam exchanged a look with one of his junior officers, Garcia. "You see anyone with her?" he asked quietly. Garcia shook his head. "Negative, Sarge. No one's approached her since we've been here." It was then that Bolt slowed his pace. The lead shepherd's head turned deliberately toward the girl, his body shifting from a patrol stance to one of deep caution. One by one, as if connected by an invisible thread, the other 13 dogs began to copy his behavior, their noses lifted together, sniffing the air, their entire focus narrowing onto the solitary child. A few passengers started to take notice. Some pointed, thinking it was a sweet moment, a lost kid being found by the heroic K-9 unit. But the feeling wasn't sweet. It felt heavy, charged with a tension that was beginning to prickle on Liam's skin. He moved forward slowly, crouching down to her level to appear less threatening. "Hey there, kiddo," he said, his voice soft. "Are you lost? Do you know where your mom is?" The girl didn't answer. She just hugged her stuffed rabbit tighter and looked up at him with enormous, sea-green eyes that seemed hollow, as if she was looking right through him. "Can you tell me your name?" Liam tried again. Silence. only the faint sound of the rabbit's plastic eye clicking against a button as her tiny fingers shook. Behind him, the dogs grew more restless. Bolt let out a low, rumbling growl, a sound of clear warning. Liam turned, his brow furrowed in confusion. His instincts, sharpened over 15 years on the force, were screaming that something was very, very wrong. And judging by the synchronized tension running through 14 trained police dogs, he wasn't the only one who felt it. In that quiet, sunlit corner of the airport, the fragile calm was about to break. And when it did, everything was going to change. The low growl from Bolt seemed to hang in the air for a moment, a solitary note of warning in the terminal's hum. Then, as if a silent switch had been flipped, everything exploded into action. Bolt's growl erupted into a sharp, commanding bark that ricocheted off the glass walls and high ceilings. The sound was a trigger. In perfect, terrifying unison, all 14 German shepherds turned their heads as one, their focus zeroing in on the little girl in the yellow coat. Their disciplined formation broke, not into chaos, but into a new, purposeful pattern. They moved swiftly, their paws a soft thunder on the tile, forming a wide, deliberate circle around her. The coordinated movement was so sudden and so precise that it sucked the sound right out of the terminal. This was not in the manual, Liam thought, his mind racing even as his training took over. At Bonds Unspoken, we believe every story between a human and their animal companion deserves to be heard. If you agree, please like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you can join us every time another Bond speaks louder than words. Conversations died instantly. A man froze with his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. A flight attendant's cheerful greeting cut off mid-word. Every single person in the vicinity stopped what they were doing, their eyes widening as they tried to process the surreal scene. A tiny, silent child surrounded by a ring of powerful, tense police dogs. Hold positions. Liam's voice boomed, cutting through the stunned silence. It was a command drilled into the dogs and handlers 1,000 times. But for the first time in his career, it was ignored. The dogs didn't look at him. Their entire world had narrowed to the girl and the space around her. They weren't barking anymore. Instead, they stood their ground, bodies coiled with tension, heads low, and tails held straight and stiff. A silent curl of the lip, revealing a glint of teeth, showed their clear warning. They weren't facing the girl. They were facing out, their collective gaze scanning the crowd beyond their circle. They weren't restraining her. They were protecting her. A wave of panic, silent at first, then bubbling into frantic whispers, swept through the bystanders. People stumbled back, grabbing their children and pulling them close. A forest of phone screens lit up, recording the unbelievable event. Security officers who had been monitoring the K-9 unit's progress now rushed forward, their hands instinctively moving toward their sidearms. "Stand down," Liam shouted, his palm raised toward the advancing security team. His heart hammered against his ribs, but his training held. He knew these dogs. He had raised Bolt from a puppy. He trusted them with his life. If they were defying a direct command, if they were acting as one like this, there was a reason, a profound, undeniable reason. "Easy, team. Easy now," he murmured, his voice dropping to a calm, steady tone as he took a cautious step toward Bolt. The lead shepherd's gaze was darting between the girl and something, or someone, in the crowd, his nostrils flaring as he sampled the air. Every muscle in the dog's body was vibrating with restrained energy, a live wire of instinct. The other dogs mirrored his intensity, their low, harmonized growls creating a chilling chorus that seemed to make the very air vibrate. The little girl, impossibly, still hadn't cried out. She stood inside her circle of canine guardians, her small frame dwarfed by them. She looked from one dog to another, her sea-green eyes wide with confusion, but not with the raw terror one would expect. She just clutched her stuffed rabbit, her tiny fingers working against its matted fur. The sunlight streamed down, highlighting the contrast between the glistening, powerful coats of the dogs and the small, bright yellow of her jacket, a striking portrait of immense power and fragile innocence colliding. "What's going on, Sarge?" Officer Garcia whispered, his face pale. "I've never seen anything like this." I don't know, Liam replied, his eyes constantly scanning the perimeter, looking for whatever threat the dogs had sensed. But do not break their circle. Let them work. Trust them. The crowd's whispers grew louder, more frantic. Is she dangerous? A woman hissed. What could a child possibly have? Another man asked, his voice trembling. Look at them. They're not hurting her. They're guarding her. Then Bolt barked again, a short, urgent, staccato sound. On cue, the circle of dogs adjusted their stance almost imperceptibly, tightening their formation, closing the gap between them. The message was now crystal clear. This was a shield, a living, breathing barricade. Liam's pulse thrummed at his ears. He could read Bolt like no one else, and what he saw in his partner's posture wasn't aggression. It was a fierce, primal duty mixed with a layer of fear. Bolt wasn't reacting to the girl. He was reacting for her. Something near her or on her had triggered their deepest protective instincts. Something human senses had missed entirely. Liam crouched slightly, his hand hovering near his utility belt, his eyes sweeping the surrounding faces. Frightened passengers, confused security, a janitor paused with his cart. Nothing seemed overtly out of place, but the dogs knew better. The echoing barks had settled into a tense silence, broken only by the muffled PA system and the ragged breathing of the onlookers. Then, without any further warning, Bolt's ears shot straight up. His head turned with laser, focused toward the little girl's stuffed rabbit. A deep, rumbling growl grew in his chest, lower and more menacing than before. It was a sound Liam had only heard a handful of times in his career, a sound that promised imminent danger. Liam's breath caught in his throat. Whatever had drawn his dog's unwavering attention, it was connected to that worn-out toy. And in that single, heart-stopping instant, the calm morning at the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport officially dissolved into chaos. The tension in the air snapped like a frayed rope. The moment Bolt lunged, not at the girl, but directly toward the stuffed rabbit in her arms, the terminal erupted into pure, unadulterated chaos. A collective scream tore through the crowd. People scrambled backward, tripping over luggage and each other. A tower of suitcases wobbled and crashed to the floor, spilling clothes across the polished tiles. A coffee cart was knocked over, sending a river of dark liquid and shattered ceramics spreading through the waiting area. The sharp, bitter smell of spilled coffee mixed with a sour scent of human fear, creating a nauseating cocktail in the air. The previously orderly scene transformed into a panicked stampede as airport security officers fought to contain the situation, their shouts lost in the din. The sound was overwhelming, a fierce, rhythmic barking from 14 dogs that echoed off every hard surface, mixed with the screams of terrified travelers and the sudden, blaring shriek of the terminal's emergency alarm. The alarm wasn't just loud. It was a physical pressure, vibrating in Liam's chest and making his teeth ache. Overhead, red lights began to flash, casting everything in a pulsing, bloody glow. Everyone stay back. Get back! Liam yelled, his voice a raw command that was swallowed by the noise. Fear is contagious, and it had already infected the entire South Terminal. Some passengers, seeing the dog's intensity, were convinced the little girl was about to be attacked. Others, their minds jumping to the worst-case scenario, pointed and shouted, "Bomb!" The word rippled through the crowd, amplifying the panic tenfold. In the eye of his hurricane, the little girl remained frozen, a statue of fear. Her blue eyes, wide and unblinking, darted from the barking dogs to the screaming faces around her. A single tear traced a path down her pale cheek, but she made no sound. Bolt had positioned his body squarely between her and the surging crowd, a living, breathing shield. The other 13 dogs mirrored him perfectly, their circle now a defensive ring, their heads turned outward, growling at anyone who came too close. They were no longer just protecting her from an unseen threat. They were protecting her from the panic they had inadvertently caused. Liam's instincts, honed by years of experience, were screaming at him that this wasn't a loss of control. This was the opposite. Every movement, every synchronized growl, every twitch of their ears was deliberate. They were working as a team, executing a protocol that bypassed their training and tapped into something deeper, more primal. "Bolt!" he called out firmly, locking eyes with his partner. "What is it, boy? What do you smell?" Bolt didn't even blink. He pressed closer to the girl, his nose twitching frantically near the stuffed rabbit once more, and let out a deep, warning bark that seemed to vibrate through the floor. It was a sound of pure urgency. Liam's blood ran cold. He keyed his radio, his voice tight and clipped. "Command! This is Unit Bravo at South Terminal, Gate B7. We have AK-9 alert on a child's possession. I am declaring a code black. Repeat, code black. I need bomb squad on standby and a full terminal evacuation of my immediate vicinity. Seal off Gate B7 immediately." The response was instantaneous. "Copy that, Unit Bravo. Code black acknowledged. ETA on bomb squad is 6 minutes. Security is mobilizing for evacuation." All around them, security teams rushed to block the concourse, herding the frantic stream of passengers toward emergency exits. The scene was one of utter confusion and fear. Flashing lights, shouted orders, and the relentless, echoing bark of the dogs. The ordinary morning had been utterly obliterated. Amidst the storm, Liam forced himself to crouch down near the girl again, speaking in the softest, calmest tone he could muster, despite the adrenaline screaming through his veins. "Hey, sweetheart, it's okay. You're safe. These dogs are here to help you. You're doing great. Just stay right there with them." The child blinked, her small voice barely a whisper. Yet it cut through the noise and hit Liam with the force of a physical blow. "They're not mad," she trembled, her eyes fixed on Bolt. "They're scared." Her words resonated deep within him. He turned to look at Bolt, who stood rigid, his tail straight out, his gaze locked on the stuffed rabbit with an unnerving intensity. Liam's gut twisted into a knot. His K-9 partner wasn't scared. He was issuing a warning. But the girl was right. Beneath the fierce professionalism, there was an edge of canine fear, the instinctual reaction to a clear and present danger. Whatever Bolt was sensing, it wasn't just a theoretical threat. It was imminent. And as Liam's eyes followed the dog's unwavering focus to the silent, worn-out toy, a terrifying realization dawned on him. Somewhere inside that innocent-looking rabbit, hidden beneath soft fur and childhood memories, was a reason his entire unit had gone on high alert. It was the reason the airport was being evacuated, and it was the reason everyone in the vicinity was holding their breath, waiting for a single, catastrophic moment that could end it all. The air inside the sealed-off South Terminal was thick and heavy, charged with a paralyzing mixture of fear and anticipation. The initial wave of panic screams had subsided, replaced by an eerie, strange silence broken only by the relentless, low growls of the K-9 unit and the distant, muffled sounds of the ongoing evacuation beyond the security cordon. Red emergency lights continued to wash over the scene in rhythmic pulses, painting the faces of the remaining officers in shades of crimson and shadow, making the entire situation feel like a pause scene from a high-stakes thriller. Liam Carter stood his ground, his entire being focused on the tiny girl and the dog that was his partner. The world had narrowed to this few square feet of polished airport floor. He took a slow, deliberate knee, keeping his movements fluid and non-threatening. The last thing he needed was to spook the child or the dogs any further. Bolt remained at his side, a statue of tension, his eyes fixed on the stuffed rabbit as it were a venomous snake poised to strike. The other dogs maintained their protective circle, a formidable barrier between the girl and the rest of the world. Their training was now secondary to a deeper, more ancient instinct to guard the vulnerable. "Sweetheart," Liam said, his voice soft but firm, needing to be heard over the ambient alarm and the dog's warnings. "I need you to hand me your toy." He saw the immediate flash of resistance in her wide, sea-green eyes. She hugged the rabbit closer, her small body trembling violently. "It's my friend," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. The simple declaration was laden with a child's pure love and dependency. "His name is Hopper. Daddy gave him to me." Those words, "Daddy gave him to me," hit Liam with a fresh wave of urgency and dread. This wasn't just a toy. It was a tangible link to a parent, a cherished possession. Taking from her felt cruel, but the cold, logical part of his brain, the part trained for threats, knew it was essential. "I promise you, I will give Hopper right back," Liam said, pouring as much sincerity into his voice as he possibly could. He held out his gloved hand, palm up, an invitation, not a demand. The girl, Lily. He realized he still didn't know her name, looked for his face to Bolt's intense stare, and then down at the worn fur of the rabbit. A silent internal battle played out on her features. Finally, with a heart-wrenching sniffle, she slowly, reluctantly, extended the toy towards him. Liam took it with the utmost care, his thick gloves making the action slightly clumsy. The moment the stuffed animal left her grasp, the little girl wrapped her arms around herself. Looking suddenly smaller and more lost than ever, the toy felt ordinary at first, the soft, matted fur familiar to the touch. But as he adjusted his grip, his fingers registered something wrong. It was subtly heavier than a plush toy should be, and there was a distinct, cold weight nestled deep within its torso. It wasn't the chill of the air conditioning. It was a dense, metallic coldness that seemed to seep through the fabric and into his very bones. It felt hidden, purposeful. "Diaz," Liam called out, his voice low, but cutting clearly through the tense atmosphere. "Get the portable scanner over here. Now." Officer Garcia, who was standing a few feet away, moved with swift efficiency, unclipping a compact, handheld device from his kit. It was a sophisticated piece of gear capable of detecting a range of metallic and chemical signatures. The soft whirring sound it made as it powered up seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet space. Liam held the rabbit steady while Garcia slowly passed the scanner over its body. The device's screen remained a calm, steady green for a second that felt like an hour. Then it lit up with frantic orange glow, and a sharp, high-frequency beep-beep-beep sliced through the terminal's background noise. Everyone in the immediate vicinity froze. The barking of the dogs intensified, becoming more sharp and urgent. They sensed the confirmation, the validation of their fears. "What is it?" Liam asked, his throat suddenly tight, making it difficult to speak. Garcia looked down at the reading on the screen, his face a mask of disbelief and growing alarm. "Strong metal signature," he reported, his voice hushed, "coming from inside the torso. It's dense." A cold knot tightened in Liam's stomach. Bolt let out another low, guttural growl. Taking a single step back, the fur along his spine bristling. The other dogs responded in a chorus of synchronized barks, their circle tightening instinctively around the girl once more, their bodies vibrating with a renewed sense of vigilance. Liam turned his gaze back to the child, his heart aching for her. "Do you know what's inside Hopper, honey? Did you put anything in there?" The girl shook her head vigorously, fresh tears welling in her eyes and spilling over. "No, it's just a bear. It's just Hopper. He has a jingly ball in his tummy. That's all." Her voice was a desperate plea for him to believe her. The scanner beeped again, even louder and more insistent this time. Garcia's hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as he adjusted the device's settings. "Liam, sir." "This isn't a jingly ball. The signature is all wrong. There's wiring in here. I'm reading a distinct configuration of conductive materials." The words landed not like a pebble, but like a crack of thunder. Wiring. The word transformed the situation entirely. This was no longer just a suspicious object. It was a potential incendiary or explosive device. The air seemed to be sucked out of the entire terminal. "Everyone back off," Liam commanded, his voice rising to a boom that brooked no argument. "Carefully. Now." Officers and handlers ushered each other back, creating a wider perimeter. Liam, moving with painstaking slowness, placed the stuffed rabbit gently on the floor, as if it were made of glass. It lay there, a seemingly innocent child's toy against the cold, hard tile, now the most dangerous object in the entire airport. The bomb squad was on its way, but every second stretched into a terrifying eternity. Bolt stood guard over it, his body stiff, his eyes locked on the toy with an unblinking intensity, as if expecting it to move or come to life at any moment. Garcia's radio crackled to life. "EOD is on site, Unit Bravo. They are suiting up. ETA to your position, 2 minutes." Liam nodded tightly, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from the little girl. She was crying softly now, her small shoulders shaking, and then her small, broken voice pierced the heavy silence once more. "I told him not to put it in there." The sentence hung in the air, chilling and profound. Liam felt a jolt of electricity shoot straight down his spine. He slowly turned to face her fully. "Told who, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Who did you tell not to put in there?" She sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "The man, the nice man at the airport. He said Daddy sent him to fix Hopper, that his stitching was coming loose." A chill, colder than the metallic core inside the toy, shot through Liam's chest. The pieces of a horrifying puzzle were snapping together with devastating clarity. Whoever had tampered with this bear hadn't just been hiding something. They had used this child, her innocence and her love for a gift from her father, as the perfect, unsuspicious cover. The real question now wasn't just what was inside the toy. It was who had given it to her and what their endgame truly was. Just as the bomb squad, clad in heavy, intimidating Yodi suits, began to move into the terminal with their specialized equipment, a raw, desperate scream pierced through the residual chaos from the edge of the security cordon. A raw scream, tearing through the chaos. "Lily!" The sound was primal, a mother's cry torn from the deepest well of fear. All heads turned as a woman fought her way past a line of security officers, her face streaked with tears, her hair a disheveled mess. Her eyes were wild, frantically scanning the area until they landed on the little girl surrounded by dogs. "That's my daughter. Please, you have to let me through. She's only 4. Somebody took her from the restroom just 10 minutes ago." Her voice broke, trembling with a terror that was undeniably real. Officers immediately moved to block her path more firmly. "Ma'am, you need to stop. This is an active restricted zone." But she fought against them with a strength born of pure panic. "Please, I just want my baby." Liam turned sharply, his mind reeling. Asterisk her daughter, taken from the restroom. Asterisk, he motioned for the officers to hold their positions, but not to use force, and he stepped forward cautiously. "Ma'am," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. "What is your name?" "Emily. Emily Parker," she cried, her chest heaving with sobs. "Please, I just need to see if she's okay." Liam glanced down at Bolt. The shepherd's reaction was instantaneous. His body stiffened, his tail went rigid, and he let out a deep, instinctive growl directed straight at the woman, a clear sign of mistrust and alarm. Emily Parker froze in her tracks, her eyes widening in fresh fear at the dog's reaction. But then, just as quickly as it started, Bolt's posture changed. The growl subsided into a soft whine. His tail gave a tentative, slow wag. He took a single cautious step toward her, his nose twitching as he sampled her scent from a distance. The transformation was clear to Liam. Bolt had made his judgment. The woman's scent, her pheromones of pure, unadulterated maternal fear, had told him everything he needed to know. She wasn't a threat. She was a victim. She was telling the truth. Liam felt a wave of profound relief wash over him, a slight loosening of the vice around his own chest. He nodded to the security team. "Let her through." Emily didn't need a second invitation. She sprinted forward, falling to her knees on the hard floor and wrapping her arms around her trembling child, sobbing uncontrollably. "Lily, sweetheart. Oh my God, are you okay? I was so scared." The little girl, Lily, burst into tears for the first time, the dam of her own fear finally breaking. She clutched her mother's shirt as if she were afraid she would vanish into thin air again. The sight was so powerfully emotional that it silenced the room for a moment. Even the dogs seemed to relax slightly, their tails lowering from their stiff, alert positions, though their watchful eyes never stopped scanning. Liam gave them a moment, a precious few seconds of reunion amidst the crisis, before he knelt beside them. "Ma'am, Emily, we found something inside your daughter's toy. We need to know. Do you have any idea what it could be? Do you know anything about this rabbit?" Emily Parker looked up, her face drained of all color as her eyes fell upon the stuffed animal lying ominously on the floor a dozen feet away, surrounded by bomb squad technicians. That's Hopper," she stammered, her voice shaky. "It's her favorite. Her father gave it to her before." She stopped mid-sentence, her lips beginning to tremble uncontrollably. "Before what?" Liam pressed, his tone gentle but insistent. They needed answers, and they needed them now. Her voice cracked, barely audible, before he disappeared. The final piece of the puzzle slammed into place with the force of a physical blow. This was no random security scare. It was connected to something far bigger, far darker than a simple lost child. As Bolt pressed closer to the sobbing mother and daughter, his ears suddenly perked up again, swiveling like radar dishes. His body tensed once more, his alert gaze turning sharply toward the massive windows that overlooked the runway. The immediate danger with the toy was being handled. But Liam noticed a change in his partner instantly. A cold dread settled in his gut. The dog's instincts were screaming once again. The danger wasn't over. It had just changed shape, and it was moving closer. The terminal had fallen into an uneasy, watchful silence, a stark contrast to the chaos of just minutes before. The only movements were the deliberate, practiced actions of the bomb disposal technicians, clad in their bulky, intimidating suits, as they surrounded the stuffed rabbit that lay innocently on the cold floor. The EOD team worked with silent, grim efficiency, their every movement calculated and precise. Bright inspection lights had been set up, casting a harsh, clinical glow on the toy, transforming it from an object of comfort into a subject of a terrifying forensic examination. Liam stood with Emily and Lily a safe distance away, his hand resting reassuringly on Bolt's head, feeling the constant, low-frequency growl still rumbling in the dog's chest. The shepherd's focus was split between the technicians and the massive windows that looked out onto the runway, his instincts still screaming that the situation was far from resolved. Emily Parker held her daughter, Lily, in a bone-crushing hug, her body trembling not from the cold, but from the aftershocks of terror and the dawning horror of the situation. She kept whispering soothing nothings into Lily's hair, more to calm herself than the child. Liam watched them, his protective instincts flaring. This was no longer just a security incident. It was a personal tragedy unfolding in the most public way imaginable. One of the bomb technicians, his face visible through the clear visor of his helmet, carefully used a set of long, specialized tools to make a minute incision along a seam on the rabbit's back. The sound of the fabric tearing was subtle, but in the tense silence, it was as loud as a gunshot. Lily whimpered and buried her face deeper into her mother's neck. With painstaking slowness, the technician parted the fake fur and stuffing, revealing a hidden cavity within the toy's torso. Nestled inside, connected by a web of hair-thin, colorful wires, was a metallic core no bigger than a large coin. It was sleek, professional, and utterly out of place in a child's plush toy. The lead technician, a man named Dr. Evans who Liam had worked with on 2 previous occasions, straightened up and pulled his helmet off, his expression not of relief, but of deep confusion. He looked toward Liam, his brow furrowed. "It's not an explosive," Evans stated, his voice cutting clearly through the static-filled silence. "There's no primary charge, no detonator. Nothing that could cause a physical blast." A collective, shuddering sigh of relief passed through the assembled officers. Liam felt his own shoulders drop slightly, the tension in his neck easing a fraction. But Evans's next words brought the tension snapping back. "But it's active, or at least it was until very recently," he continued, holding up a small tablet that was wirelessly linked to his equipment. On the screen, a complex waveform and strings of data scrolled rapidly. It was emitting a low-power, encrypted signal. "We managed to isolate and decode a fragment of the transmission before it cut off." Liam stepped closer, his jaw tightening. "Transmitting what?" "Coordinates," Evans said grimly. "Highly precise, real-time GPS location data. This is a tracker, Liam. Military grade, by the look of it. Sophisticated, miniaturized, and very, very effective. It was like a tiny, whispering beacon, stealing secrets and shouting her location to the enemy." The words landed like a physical blow. Emily's face went a shade paler, if that was even possible. She looked down at her daughter, then back at the dissected toy, a fresh wave of horror dawning in her eyes. "They found us again," she whispered, her voice cracking with a despair so profound it was painful to hear. "I thought we'd lost them in Chicago, but they found us." Liam turned toward her, his mind racing, tried to connect the disparate pieces. "Who are they, Emily? And who would be tracking your family with military hardware?" Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over and tracing clean paths through the grime on her cheeks. She held Lily tighter, as if trying to physically shield her from the truth. My husband, Daniel, he wasn't just an engineer. He worked for a private defense contractor, Ether Systems. He was a lead on a project developing a new kind of encrypted communication chip for the military. It was supposed to be unhackable. She took a shaky breath, the memory clearly agonizing. 3 months ago, he uncovered something, a backdoor, a deliberate breach in the system's security. He believed someone was siphoning data, potentially selling it to hostile entities. He tried to report it through the proper channels, but before he could formally present his evidence, he disappeared. The silence that followed was heavier than before. The hum of the airport seemed to fade away, leaving only Emily's trembling voice. The official report called it a car accident. Single vehicle, went off a cliff near our home in Oregon. They said he was working late, fell asleep at the wheel. She shook her head, a fierce, desperate denial, but I didn't believe it. Daniel was a careful driver, and he was scared in the days before it happened. Really scared. He told me to trust no one from his work. Liam exchanged a grim glance with Officer Garcia. The word breach set off every alarm bell in his head. This was spiraling far beyond a simple case of a lost child and a suspicious toy. So you think someone from this company, Ether Systems, is targeting you? Liam asked, keeping his voice low and calm. Emily nodded weakly, her body slumping with exhaustion and grief. A week after his funeral, I started noticing cars following us. We get strange calls in the middle of the night, just heavy breathing. I changed our numbers. I moved us to a hotel, then to my sister's place in Portland. I thought we were safe. When I decided to take Lily to my mother's in Vermont, I thought we'd finally gotten away. Her voice broke into a sob. At the airport in Portland, a man, he was so kind, he approached us at a cafe. He noticed the stitching on Hopper's ear was coming loose. He said he was a retired tailor, that he could fix it in a jiffy. I was so stressed, so paranoid about everything else. I thought it was a moment of human kindness. I let him take the toy for 5 minutes. I didn't know he was putting that thing inside it. The realization hit everyone within earshot like a shockwave. They hadn't just planted a device. They had orchestrated a cruel, psychological manipulation. They had used a mother's stress and a child's innocence as a perfect camouflage. The dogs, with their primal senses, had seen the ruse that no human could have detected. Their instincts had saved not only the girl, but potentially everyone in the terminal from whatever secondary plan was in motion. Dr. Evans interrupted the heavy silence. We traced the signal's last known recipient. The data was being pinged to a receiver that was very close by, likely within a few hundred meters of this terminal. Whoever was on the other end of this, he said, pointing at the eviscerated toy, knew exactly where she was in real time. As the technician spoke, Bolt's head snapped up. His target wasn't the dissected toy anymore. It was a black van outside. Liam followed his partner's line of sight. His eyes narrowed. There, parked just beyond the perimeter fence on a service road, was a black van. It was sleek, nondescript, with tinted windows so dark they were like pools of ink. Its engine was running, a faint plume of exhaust visible in the cool morning air. Garcia's hand went immediately to his radio. We got movement near the perimeter fence, south side. Black van, no visible plates. Engine running. Liam's pulse spiked. This was it. The unseen enemy was making itself visible. Get eyes on that vehicle now. I want a description of anyone inside. Do not approach. Just observe and report. Bolt barked again, louder this time, more insistent, and the other dogs of the unit joined in, their chorus rising into a unified roar of warning that echoed through the concourse. It was a living, breathing alarm system, more accurate and more timely than any technology they possessed. Every fiber of their being was radiating a single, clear purpose. Asterisk there. The threat is there. Asterisk. Liam looked at Emily, then down at the child, Lily, who was now trembling in her mother's arms, her earlier bravery completely spent. Whatever this is, he said, his voice grim and resolute, it's not over yet. The van's headlights flicked on, 2 blinding white orbs in the dim morning light. The engine roared, a sudden aggressive sound that was audible even to the thick terminal glass. Within seconds, the vehicle sped away from the fence, tires screeching as it tore down the service road, heading away from a main airport thoroughfares. "They're on the move." Garcia yelled into his radio. "All available units. Intercept that vehicle. South Perimeter Road, moving eastbound." Inside the terminal, Bolt lunged toward the window, barking furiously, his claws scraping against the tile floor. The rest of the K-9 unit joined him in a perfect, deafening unison. Their collective roar a testament to their frustration and their unwavering alertness. They had done their job, they had pinpointed the danger, and now they were watching it escape. Liam's heart hammered against his ribs. He had seen Bolt react to countless threats, but this was different. This was personal. It was as if the dogs understood the violation, the calculated cruelty of using a child in this way. Their reaction was not just professional. It was primal, protective. Through the glass, just for a split second as the van accelerated, Liam saw the silhouette of the passenger turn his head. The man's face was partially illuminated by the glow of a dashboard screen, cold, expressionless, and utterly focused. He wasn't looking at the pursuing police cars. He was looking directly at the terminal, directly at them. Bolt's growl deepened, his lips curling back to reveal his teeth, as if he, too, could see that face and recognize the scent that had been on the bear now matched the man in the van. Then, the vehicle swerved around a corner and disappeared behind a row of hangars, its tires skidding into the low-hanging coastal fog that was beginning to roll in. Liam stood motionless for a moment, the adrenaline a roaring torrent in his veins. The immediate, contained danger of the stuffed rabbit was gone, but a new, more fluid and dangerous threat was now in motion. He glanced down at Bolt, who still stared at the horizon, unblinking, his body a bowstring of tension. The danger hadn't been neutralized. It had simply changed locations. And Liam's gut, honed by years of experience and now perfectly aligned with his dog's instincts, told him with chilling certainty that this was far from over. The real game had just begun, and the players were now in the open. The terminal lights flickered, their steady hum now feeling fragile against a surge of raw urgency that electrified the air. The command center, once a hub of control procedure, erupted into a symphony of shouted updates and crackling radio traffic. Outside, the black van was a fleeing predator, tearing across the runway access roads with a pack of police cruisers in pursuit, their sirens wailing a dissonant chorus against the morning's fading calm. Liam stood firm at the window, his reflection a ghostly silhouette superimposed over the flashing chaos beyond. Bolt remained anchored beside him, every muscle in the shepherd's body rigid, his tail held low and stiff, his eyes unblinking as they tracked the distant movement. The dog wasn't just watching. He was hunting, his entire being focused on the van that was now the embodiment of the threat he had first smelled on the little girl's toy. Unit 3 is in pursuit. Diaz's voice cut through the noise, sharp and clear over the radio. Suspects are heading east towards the cargo terminals, refusing to stop. We got 2 males inside, visual confirmation, possibly armed. Liam's jaw clenched, the muscles bunching tight. "They're the ones," he said, the words quiet but venomous. "They planted the tracker. They were here the whole time, watching." The audacity of it was staggering. To have stayed so close, to have monitored their handiwork in real time, spoke of a chilling confidence. Behind him, Dr. Evans, a bomb technician, cleared his throat, his expression graver than before. "Officer Carter, you need to see this." The man's tone pulled Liam's attention away from the window. Evans was pointing to the dissected remains of the stuffed rabbit, its internal chip now displayed on a larger tablet screen, showing lines of complex code. "We managed to decode a larger data packet from the device's buffer. It wasn't just a location signal." Liam moved closer, a cold dread settling in his stomach. What was it relaying? "Data packets," Evans explained, zooming in on a section of the code. Small, encrypted bursts of information, piggybacking on the location pings. "We're still breaking the full encryption, but the destination coordinates we've identified, they match known, classified military communication zones." This wasn't a simple tracker. It was a live surveillance node. Emily, who had been listening while clutching Lily, gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Her eyes were wide with new, more profound horror. "Oh, God," she whispered, her voice trembling. They weren't just tracking us. They were using her, using Lily's proximity to gather data from Daniel's research network, the chip he developed. It creates secure links based on physical proximity to authorized transponders. They were using my daughter as a key, a live key, to breach the very system he died trying to protect. The revelation hit Liam like a physical blow, stealing the air from his lungs. The pieces of this sinister puzzle snapped together with devastating finality. This was no longer about stalking a grieving family. This was industrial espionage mixed with national security, and a 4-year-old girl had been an unwitting, mobile data harvesting tool. The cruelty of the scheme was beyond comprehension. Before he could form a response, Bolt suddenly barked. Not a continuous alarm, but a single, sharp, percussive woof. That cut to the technical discussion and made everyone freeze. The shepherd's head whipped away from the window, his intense gaze now fixed on the far corner of the terminal, near a dimly lit baggage storage area and a row of lockers. His nostrils flared and a deep, rumbling growl began to build his chest, a sound entirely different from his reaction to the van. This was a more immediate, more localized warning. "Bolt!" Liam's instincts were screaming. "What is it, boy?" The dog took a step forward, then another, straining against his leash, his focus absolute on a single point, a small, dark blue duffel bag, left unattended and half hidden behind a plastic bench. It was the kind of bag 1,000 travelers carried, utterly ordinary, which made its isolation and Bolt's reaction to it all the more terrifying. Liam's blood ran cold. The tracker in the bear was one thing, a tool for espionage. But this felt different. "EOD," he barked, his voice echoing in the vast space. "Check that bag. Now!" The atmosphere, which had just begun to relax, instantly snapped back to a wire-taut tension. A technician in a full bomb suit moved forward, the bulky armor making his steps slow and deliberate. The soft hum of his portable scanner powering up was the only sound. He approached the bag cautiously, the wand in his hand sweeping over the fabric in a slow, methodical arc. The scanner screen, visible to the team behind him, stayed green for a heart-stopping second. Then it flashed a violent, pulsating red. A high-pitched, continuous shriek emitted from the device. "Sir!" The technician's voice was strained, amplified by his helmet speaker. "This one's hot. Explosives residue confirmed. I'm reading a power source and a possible trigger mechanism inside." The air left Liam's lungs in a rush. This was the real threat. The tracker had been the silent, insidious part of the plan. This was a loud, brutal finale. The van's escape had been the signal that triggered a countdown on the secondary device, pulling their attention away while the true danger sat waiting in their midst. "Evacuate the terminal. Now!" Liam's shout was a raw, commanding roar that brooked no delay. Full emergency protocol. "Move! Move! Move!" His team, drilled for this exact scenario, exploded into action. Officers who had been securing perimeter now rushed to shepherd the remaining airport staff and the few other civilians who hadn't yet been fully cleared from the adjacent gates. The alarms, which had momentarily quieted, blared back to life with renewed urgency, their sound of physical pressure in the air. Bolt barked furiously, not at the bag, but at the people, hurrying them away from the danger zone with an intelligence that was almost human. Through the window, Liam saw the flashing lights of pursuing police cars converge as a black van, its path blocked by tactical units, screeched to a violent, skidding halt. Doors were ripped open, and 2 men were dragged out, one struggling and yelling in a guttural foreign language, the other standing stiff and silent, his face a mask of cold defiance. They were here to witness it. Liam realized with a sickening lurch. They stayed to make sure it worked. Inside, the EOD technician's voice came over the comms, calm but tight with strain. "I'm initiating a control disruption. Stand by." Every second stretched into an agony of anticipation. Liam's hand found its way to Bolt's head again, the dog solid, warm presence a grounding force in the maelstrom. He looked over at Emily, who had shielded Lily's body with her own, both of them crouched behind a reinforced security desk. The little girl's eyes were squeezed shut. Then the technician's voice returned. Device neutralized. We're clear. Repeat, the area is clear. A wave of palpable relief, so powerful it felt like a physical force washed through the terminal. Shoulders slumped. Held breaths were released in ragged sighs. The immediate, visceral threat was over. Liam exhaled, his own heart hammering against his ribs. He looked down at Bolt, whose chest was heaving from the exertion and excitement, but whose eyes had finally lost their frantic edge, becoming steady and watchful once more. The danger had passed, but the truth it revealed was far darker. These men hadn't just planned a sophisticated data heist. They had planned a brutal, symbolic attack. And if Bolt's preternatural senses hadn't pinpointed the secondary device in time, the airport and everyone in it would have paid the ultimate price for one man's attempt to expose the truth. Outside the terminal, the world had become a blur of screaming engines and flashing lights. The black van, now a wounded animal with its tires shredded by the spike strips, fishtailed violently before slamming sideways into the chain-link security fence with a deafening crash of twisting metal and shattering glass. The impact echoed across the tarmac, a final, definitive end to its desperate flight. Before the dust could even settle, a perimeter of police cruisers encircled it, their doors flying open to disgorge a tactical team with weapons drawn. The air, already thick with the smell of burnt rubber and fear, now crackled with the tension of standoff. Hands where we can see them. Now, now, now. The shouted commands were sharp, absolute, and left no room for negotiation. The driver's side door was wrenched open from the outside. A man, his face contorted with rage and frustration, tumbled out, yelling obscenities in a language that wasn't English. He made a frantic, foolish lunge for an object tucked into his waistband, but he never stood a chance. Thor, a powerful German shepherd from Liam's unit, was released from his handler's grip. The dog moved like a brown and black missile, launching through the air and tackling the man to the asphalt with controlled, efficient force. His bark was a sharp report next to the suspect's ear, and his bite, though designed to hold and not maim, was enough to make the man scream and freeze in instant, terrified submission. The passenger side door was forced open simultaneously. The second man, the one with the cold, expressionless face Liam had seen through the window, simply raised his hands. There was no struggle, no protest. He was dragged from a vehicle and pinned face down on the ground, his wrists secured behind his back with zip ties. His silence was somehow more menacing than his partner's frantic struggles. He didn't look at the officers. His gaze was fixed on some distant point on the horizon, his mind clearly already working on his next move, his escape plan from custody. Suspects in custody. Diaz's voice roared through the radio, breathless with adrenaline. Repeat, both subjects apprehended and secured. Inside the terminal, watching the scene unfold through glass like a live-action news broadcast, Liam felt a massive wave of relief wash over him. The immediate, physical threat was contained. He could feel the tension in Bolt's body finally begin to ease, the low growl subsiding into a soft pant. The shepherd's job, for now, was done. He gave the dog a firm, reassuring pat on the flank, his fingers digging into the thick fur. "You did good, buddy. You always do." Within minutes, the crash site transformed from a tactical zone into a forensic one. Bomb techs, evidence specialists, and intelligence officers swarmed the wrecked van like ants on a discarded scrap of food. They moved with practiced efficiency, photographing, bagging, and cataloging everything. From a mangled interior, they retrieved sleek laptops, a stack of false passports with expertly forged stamps, and several small, ruggedized, encrypted hard drives that looked capable of surviving the crash. One of the techs, a young woman with a serious expression, held up a large evidence bag and called out, "Sergeant Carter? You're going to want to see this." Liam, with Bolt walking calmly at his heel, approached the growing collection of evidence. Diaz joined him, his eyes wide with a mixture of professional curiosity and personal revulsion. The tech held open the clear plastic bag. Inside were dozens of high-resolution surveillance photographs. The images were methodical, invasive. There was Emily, caught in a long-distance lens, loading groceries into her car outside a supermarket in what looked like a different state. There was Lily, smiling on a swing in a park. The photo timestamped from just 2 weeks prior. And there was Daniel Parker, the late husband and father, in several older images taken at what appeared to be his office building, his face unaware of the lens tracking his movements. Each photo was meticulously annotated with coordinates, timestamps, and even notes on daily routines. "They've been tracking this family for months," Liam muttered, the sheer scale of the operation settling heavily on his shoulders. The stuffed rabbit hadn't been the beginning. It was just the latest, most cruel tool in a long-running campaign of terror. This wasn't about one airport. This is global, professional. Back inside the terminal, the atmosphere was shifting from one of high-alert crisis to exhausted aftermath. The red emergency lights were finally switched off, and the normal, bright fluorescence of the airport seemed almost blinding in contrast. The relentless blare of the alarms cut out, leaving a ringing silence in its wake that felt both peaceful and unsettling. The crowd of evacuated passengers and staff, now being allowed to trickle back into the secured area, stood in a hushed, awed group, their eyes fixed on the mother, the child, and the circle of dogs. Emily sat on the cold floor, no longer sobbing, but simply holding Lily with a quiet, desperate strength. The child's tiny hands were fisted in her mother's shirt, her face buried in the fabric. But then, as the silence deepened, Lily slowly turned her head. Her eyes, red-rimmed and puffy, found Bolt, the German shepherd. Sensing the shift in the girl's attention, approached slowly. His earlier ferocity was completely gone, replaced by a gentle, almost humble demeanor. He lowered his massive head and sniffed the air around her, then cautiously pressed his wet nose into her open palm. Lily blinked, startled for a moment. Then a sound emerged from her that was as pure and cleansing as sunlight breaking through storm clouds, a soft, watery giggle. It was the first sound of pure, unadulterated innocence the airport had heard in hours. Her small hand, which had been trembling moments before, reached up and wrapped around Bolt's thick neck, burying her fingers in his fur. "Good dog," she whispered. The entire K-9 unit seemed to understand the significance of the moment. As one, they relaxed. One by one, the other 13 dogs lowered themselves to the floor, their tense postures melting away, their tails beginning to sway slowly, gently back and forth. They formed a loose, peaceful circle around the mother and child, not as enforcers, but as guardians. The sight was profoundly powerful, a living tapestry of protection and compassion. Emily looked up at Liam, her eyes glistening with a fresh wave of tears, but these were tears of gratitude, of a burden shared. "You and your dogs, you saved us. I can't even." Liam shook his head softly, a rare, genuine smile touching the corners of his mouth. "No, ma'am," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "He did." He nodded toward Bolt, who was now sitting proudly but humbly beside Lily, accepting her gentle strokes as his rightful due. "We just follow his lead." Bolt let out a soft whine and turned his head, licking Lily's cheek once in a quick, sandpapery gesture. The little girl giggled again, a brighter, happier sound this time. "Good boy," she repeated, pressing her forehead against his. The shepherd stayed perfectly still, as if he understood the sacredness of this simple act of trust and affection. Around them, the gathered airport staff and passengers began to applaud. It started as a few scattered claps, then grew, swelling into a full, heartfelt ovation. Cameras flashed, but for once, the attention didn't feel intrusive. It felt like a tribute. People clapped for the dogs, for the officers, for the mother and daughter who had been through hell and come out the other side, reunited against impossible odds. Liam stood quietly, letting the moment wash over him. He knew the world would call this a miracle, a stroke of incredible luck. But he knew better. It wasn't luck. It was instinct, dedication, and the unbreakable, unspoken bond between handler and dog that had once again defied the impossible and carved a path through the darkness. As Lily buried her smiling face in Bolt's fur, Emily looked at Liam, her expression one profound, life-altering gratitude. "He didn't just save us today," she said, her voice soft but clear. "He gave us back our future." And in that single quiet moment, every officer in the room felt the truth of it. This had been more than a rescue. It had been redemption, a restoration of hope, paid for encourage and sealed with a dog's lick and a child's giggle. By the time the last police cruiser pulled away from the runway, its lights off and its purpose fulfilled, a heavy, profound stillness had settled over the airport. The chaos, the sirens, the shouting, all of it had faded, receding like a violent tide, and leaving behind the quiet hum of distant jet engines and the soft, murmuring voices of a world trying to make sense of what it had just witnessed. Liam Carter stood by the massive terminal window, his posture finally slackening after hours of coiled tension. His reflection in the glass was ghostly, framed by the pale, soft glow of the morning sun as it finally broke through the dissipating fog. Dawn was here, a new day dawning on the aftermath of a nightmare. Bolt sat at his feet, silent now. The great shepherd's head rested on his paws, his eyes half closed, but his ears remained subtly active, twitching at the sound of a distant cart or a closing door. The relentless energy that had vibrated through him for the last hour had ebbed, replaced by a calm, watchful exhaustion. For the first time since the alert began, Liam allowed himself to take a full, deep, cleansing breath. The adrenaline that had been his fuel, that had sharpened his senses and hardened his resolve, began to recede, leaving in its wake a deep, bodily ache and a quiet thunder of realization. He turned from his reflection and let his gaze sweep across the South Terminal. His officers looked drained, their uniforms rumpled, their faces smudged with grime and fatigue. But they were alive. They moved slowly now, coordinating with airport security to fully stand down the emergency protocols. The crowd of passengers, those who had chosen to stay or who were now being allowed to reclaim their belongings, stood in small, hushed groups. They weren't panicked anymore. They were reverent, their eyes constantly drifting toward the center of the room, where a mother held her daughter and where a team of dogs sat in a peaceful circle. Liam's eyes found Emily and Lily. Emily was on her feet now, holding Lily on her hip. The little girl's head was nestled on her mother's shoulder, her thumb in her mouth, her eyes drowsy. A paramedic was quietly speaking to Emily, checking her vitals with a soft, professional demeanor. As if sensing his gaze, Lily lifted her head. Her tired eyes found Bolt, and she gave a tiny, weak wave. Immediately, the shepherd's ears perked up. His tail thumped once, twice, against the polished floor, a slow, gentle wag of acknowledgement. It was a simple gesture, but in that context, it felt monumental. Liam's throat tightened with an emotion he couldn't quite name. It was part pride, part relief, and part something deeper, something that touched on the very reason he had chosen this life, this partnership with a creature of such profound instinct. "They don't just save lives," he murmured to Diaz, who had stepped up beside him, also watching the scene. "Sometimes they say what's left of our faith in this world, our faith in goodness and protection, in simple, selfless courage." Diaz nodded quietly, his usual sharp humor replaced by a thoughtful solemnity. "They see things we never will, Liam. They operate on a frequency we lost a long time ago. Today they were our eyes and ears in a place we're all blind and deaf." Liam placed a hand on Bolt's back, feeling the steady, strong heartbeat beneath his palm. The fur was warm, the body solid and real. "Yeah," he said softly, the word laden with meaning, "and thank God for that." Outside, the sky continued to brighten, shifting from the soft pinks and oranges of dawn to the clear, bright blue of morning. The first commercial flight since the lockdown began was being prepared for departure, a massive airliner being guided away from its gate. For the passengers lining up at the gate, their journey was just beginning, a routine trip. For Liam and his team, it felt like something else entirely had ended, and something new, something significant, had just been born. 2 weeks later, the world was still talking about the miracle at Seattle-Tacoma. The footage of Bolt and the K-9 unit had been viewed, analyzed, and celebrated over 100 million times. News anchors and security experts debated the science behind the dog's instincts, calling them guardians with senses that defied modern technology. Children across the country mailed in crayon drawings of German shepherds wearing proudly drawn police badges, their stick-figure handlers standing beside them. Strangers sent bouquets of flowers, heartfelt letters, and boxes of premium dog treats to the unit's headquarters, their gratitude spilling over in handwritten notes and carefully chosen toys. But for Liam Carter, the external noise, the fame, the interviews, he continued to decline. The public adoration was just static. It was background hum to the quiet, steady rhythm of his work and the bond he shared with his partner. None of the outside attention could compare to the invitation that arrived one crisp, clear morning. They were asked to visit the hospital where Lily Parker was being kept for a final round of checkups and psychological evaluation. The hospital halls were a world away from the echoing, chaotic terminal. They were quiet, sanitized, and filled with a soft, rhythmic beeping of monitors and a faint, clean smell of antiseptic. Liam walked slowly, Bolt heeling perfectly at his side, the dog's nails clicking softly on the linoleum floor. He felt a strange nervousness fluttering in his own chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced since his first days as a rookie officer. This wasn't a confrontation with a suspect. It was a different kind of meeting entirely, one where the stakes felt just as high, but in a profoundly human way. As they entered the room, lit by the gentle morning sun streaming through the window, Lily's face, which had been pale and drawn in the news clips, instantly lit up. Her eyes, those wide sea-green eyes that had held so much terror, now sparkled with pure, unadulterated joy. "Bolt," she squealed, her voice still a little weak, but filled with undeniable energy. She sat up straighter in the bed, her small arms opening wide in a universal gesture of welcome. Bolt's disciplined heel broke. His tail began to wag furiously, a happy, sweeping motion that stirred the air in the quiet room. He looked up at Liam, as if asking for permission, his entire body wriggling with barely contained excitement. Liam gave a soft, almost imperceptible nod. "Go on, buddy." The shepherd padded forward, his movement now fluid and gentle. He approached the bed and, in a gesture of exquisite care, placed his head on the mattress right beside Lily's hand. She giggled, the sound like music after the silence of the past weeks, and immediately buried her fingers in the thick fur of his neck. "Mommy, look," she said, her voice brimming with wonder. He remembered me. Emily, who was sitting in a chair beside the bed, smiled, tears of sheer happiness welling in her eyes. She looked tired, the shadows of their ordeal still under her eyes, but there was a new peace in her expression, a weight that had finally been lifted. "Of course he did, sweetheart," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Heroes never forget the ones they save." Liam stood respectfully near the doorway, his chest feeling too tight for his uniform. He had witnessed bravery in combat zones, courage in the face of natural disasters, and resilience in countless terrible situations. But this quiet, unassuming moment of connection between a child and the animal that had literally stood between her and a terrible fate was a different kind of heroism altogether. It was a kind that didn't need flashing lights or roaring crowds. It was a kind that lived in a simple, trusting touch and a dog's unwavering devotion. Emily turned her gaze from her daughter to Liam. "Officer Carter," she began, her voice soft but steady. I never got to thank you properly. That day was such a blur of fear. I don't think I formed a coherent sentence." Liam shook his head, finally finding his voice. "You don't have to, Emily. Really. Just seeing her there, smiling like that's thanks enough for a lifetime. Knowing you both made it through, that you have a future ahead of you, that's the entire point of the job." She smiled through her tears, a genuine warm smile that reached her eyes. "Still," she insisted softly, "I think you should know. The doctors and the counselors, they've all said it. If you hadn't found us when you did, if Bolt hadn't reacted with such speed and certainty, Lily and I wouldn't have survived that day. Those men, they weren't just tracking us. The bomb squad found enough evidence on their devices to suggest they were preparing to remove us, to silence us for good." She paused, swallowing hard, unable to speak the darker words aloud. "Bolt didn't just save us from being followed. He gave us a second chance at life. He gave me back my daughter." Liam felt the truth of her words settle deep in his soul. This was the reality that the news cameras couldn't capture, the profound human impact that lay beneath the viral video and the headlines. Bolt, as if understanding the gravity of the conversation, looked up from Lily's affectionate strokes, his deep brown eyes seeming to hold a wisdom that belied his canine nature. In the quiet hospital room, under the soft, warm light, he looked calm and utterly at peace. Emily then reached for a small, folded piece of paper on the bedside table. It was lined notebook paper, the kind a child would use. She handed it to Liam. Lily wanted to write something for him. She worked on it all yesterday. Liam took the note, his fingers feeling suddenly clumsy. He unfolded it carefully. Inside, in the large, uneven, and lovingly drawn handwriting of a 4-year-old, was a message. Some letters were backwards, the lines wobbled, but the meaning was crystal clear. Tell the dog he's my angel. For a long moment, Liam couldn't speak. The simple, pure faith in those 5 words closed his throat with an emotion so powerful it was almost overwhelming. He looked from a note to Bolt, who had now rested his chin back on the bed, his eyes closed in contentment as Lily gently scratched behind his ears. He looked at the little girl, who was whispering secrets into the dog's fur, and then at her mother, who watched him with an expression of boundless love. He carefully refolded the note and placed it in the chest pocket of his uniform, right over his heart. He nodded at Emily, a silent communication of understanding and shared gratitude that needed no words. Outside the hospital window, the sun climbed higher, casting a warm, golden glow across the room, illuminating the little girl and her hero in a soft, almost divine light. Liam smiled faintly, a true, unguarded smile of complete and utter fulfillment. "Come on, partner," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Another mission complete. And as man and dog left the hospital that day, walking side by side back into the world, they didn't just represent a great story or a viral sensation. They were a living, breathing testament to a truth the world had been so eager to embrace, that sometimes the greatest hearts, the most courageous spirits, and the truest angels do indeed walk on 4 legs. The return to the K-9 unit's headquarters was nothing short of a hero's welcome, albeit a quiet, bureaucratic one. The chain-link fences were now adorned with ribbons, and a growing pile of stuffed toys, flowers, and thank-you cards formed a makeshift memorial at the main gate. Inside, the atmosphere was a mixture of pride and weary adjustment. The dogs, blissfully unaware of their global fame, slipped back into their familiar routines of training, feeding, and rest with simple, satisfying ease. For them, the event at the airport was a job done, a command obeyed, a pack protected. But for their human handlers, the return to normal was a more complex transition. Liam found himself grappling with a newfound, low-grade anxiety during routine patrols. Where once he relied on a balanced combination of his own senses and Bolt's, he now found himself second-guessing his own perceptions, waiting for a signal from his partner that might never come. He watched Bolt more intently, searching for the subtlest twitch of an ear or a change in breathing that might indicate another hidden threat. The world, which had once felt largely predictable in its patterns of crime and emergency, now seemed layered with invisible dangers, threats that only his 4-legged partner could truly perceive. This reliance was both a comfort and a source of stress. It was humbling to acknowledge that his own human senses were so limited, but it was also profoundly reassuring to have a partner who could navigate that unseen world. The media, though respectfully kept at a distance from the facility itself, continued to spin the story. A respected journalist published a lengthy feature article titled "The Unseen Shield: How AK-9's Nose Rewrote Security Protocol." The article speculated about the nature of the device and the stuffed rabbit, and the international implications of the plot the dogs had uncovered. It positioned Bolt and his unit not as lucky animals, but as essential, advanced pieces of law enforcement technology, living, breathing sensors that were immune to hacking, jamming, or technological failure. This shift in perception had tangible effects. City Council meetings saw proposals for increased funding for the K-9 unit, not just for Seattle, but as a model for major airports nationwide. Security experts appeared on news panels, debating how to integrate canine instincts more deeply with electronic surveillance. Parents wrote to the department, not just with thanks, but with questions about how to explain the event to their children. Liam was tasked with reviewing these letters, a duty he found both moving and strangely draining. One letter, from a mother in Minnesota, stood out. She wrote that her son, who had always been terrified of large dogs, had watched the video of Bolt and Lily and now begged for a German Shepherd puppy. "You didn't just save a little girl," she wrote. "You helped my little boy conquer fear." You showed him that true strength is gentle. Liam read the letter twice, then pinned it to the bulletin board in the unit's common room. It served as a quiet reminder of the wider ripple effect of their work. Meanwhile, the legal and intelligence machinery grinded on. The two captured suspects, identified as low-level operatives for a shadowy private intelligence firm with ties to several foreign governments, were being processed through the federal system. They provided limited information, but combined with the data extracted from their encrypted drives, a clearer picture emerged. The plot had indeed been about accessing Daniel Parker's proprietary communication technology. The Parker family had been targeted as the most vulnerable link in the security chain. Emily and Lily, now under new identities and relocated to a secure, undisclosed location through a federal witness protection program, were beginning the long process of rebuilding their lives. The last update Liam received was that Lily had started kindergarten. She had told her new teacher that her best friend was a police dog named Bolt, a story the teacher undoubtedly filed away as a child's charming imagination. Weeks turned into a month. The vibrant colors of the flowers at the gate faded to brittle browns, and the influx of fan mail slowed to a steady trickle. The news cycle moved on. For Liam and Bolt, this was a relief. The slow fade from the public eye allowed them to settle into a new, more profound version of their partnership. The anxiety Liam felt began to dissipate, replaced by a deeper, more implicit trust. He no longer watched Bolt for signs of danger. He simply worked alongside him, confident that if a threat emerged, his partner would signal it. Their bond, forged in the fire of an unprecedented crisis, was now tempered into something unbreakable. One evening, during a late-night shift, Liam and Bolt were conducting a final patrol of the quiet cargo terminals. The air was cool and still. Bolt, who had been walking calmly at heel, suddenly stopped, his head lifted, ears pricking forward. Liam felt a jolt of old adrenaline, his hand tightening on the leash. He followed Bolt's gaze to a stack of shipping containers. A shadow moved. Liam's heart hammered for a single, painful beat before a large raccoon waddled out from behind a container, glanced at them with beady eyes, and scurried away. Bolt let out a soft woof and looked up at Liam, almost apologetically, before resuming his walk. Liam laughed, a real, hearty laugh that echoed in the vast, empty space. The sound surprised him. It was the first time he had laughed so freely since the day at the airport. He reached down and scratched Bolt behind the ears. Just a raccoon, buddy. Good boy for checking, though. In that simple, mundane moment, Liam realized they had finally found it. The new normal. It wasn't about constant, high-stakes alertness. It was about this, a quiet partnership, a shared vigilance, and the understanding that even when the world wasn't watching, they were a team. They were guardians. And as they continued their patrol under the blanket of stars, man and dog walked on, ready for whatever came next. The transformation of the K-9 unit from a respected specialist team to a symbol of national pride brought with it a new set of rhythms and responsibilities. The day began not just with the scent of cleaning supplies and dog food, but with the rustle of paper, dozens of letters that had to be sorted, read, and often responded to. A civilian public relations officer had been temporarily assigned to them, a cheerful woman named Sarah whose primary job was to manage the deluge of goodwill without letting it disrupt the unit's core mission. Liam found himself spending the first hour of his shift not on patrol briefings, but signing oversized, glossy photographs of Bolt for charity auctions and children's hospitals. It was a strange, surreal twist to his career, but he performed the duty with a quiet sense of obligation. If this attention could help the department, or bring a moment of joy to a sick child, he would wield the pen. The most significant change, however, was in their training protocols. The event at Seattle-Tacoma had been a live-fire case study in canine instinct surpassing technological and human perception. The department's top trainers, in collaboration with behavioral scientists, developed a new, advanced training module. The goal was no longer just to train the dogs to detect known threats like narcotics or explosives. Now, they were creating complex, multi-layered scenarios designed to test and hone the dog's ability to identify anomalous threat indicators, situations where the danger wasn't a specific scent, but a pattern of wrongness. Liam and Bolt were the test subjects for the first of these new drills. They were led into a mock-up of a hotel lobby, complete with fake plants, furniture, and actor civilians. Their objective was simple: conduct a routine sweep. But the environment was designed to overload the senses with distracting, benign smells, perfumes, food, cleaning agents. Hidden within the sensory noise was a single, non-threatening element that was out of place. In this first drill, it was a specific, rare type of industrial lubricant, a scent none of the dogs had been formally trained on, placed on the handle of a briefcase carried by one of the actors. Liam moved through the space, his own senses noting nothing amiss. The actors chatted and read newspapers. It all seemed perfectly normal. But after just 30 seconds, Bolt slowed. His easy patrol gait shifted to a deliberate, cautious walk. He bypassed a woman wearing strong perfume, ignored a discarded food wrapper, and zeroed in on a man with a briefcase. He didn't sit the trained final response for a found substance. Instead, he froze, his body going rigid, his head cocked, and he let out a low, questioning whine. He was alerting, but to a threat he didn't have a defined category for. He knew it was wrong. "That's it. Perfect," the lead trainer exclaimed, stepping out from behind a one-way mirror. "That's exactly the behavioral marker we're looking for. Not a trained response, but a cognitive one. He's telling you, this doesn't belong here, not, I found explosives." Liam felt a surge of pride, so potent it was dizzying. He knelt, rubbing Bolt's shoulders vigorously. "Good boy. Such a good boy." The drill proved that the airport wasn't a fluke. It was a reproducible skill, a higher level of intelligence and intuition that could be cultivated. The public's desire to connect with the heroes was also channeled into a new, controlled initiative. The department organized a single, tightly managed Community Appreciation Day at the K-9 facility. It was an invitation-only event for the families of first responders and the children from the local hospital's pediatric ward. The goal was to transform the dogs from distant viral video stars into approachable, tangible companions. On the day of the event, the training yard was buzzing with a different kind of energy. Children in wheelchairs or holding their parents' hands watched in awe as the dogs demonstrated obedience drills and simple agility courses. Bolt, of course, was the main attraction. Liam walked him slowly through the crowd, and the shepherd seemed to understand his role perfectly. He was calm and gentle, allowing small, hesitant hands to pat his back, turning his head to avoid licking faces, but wagging his tail constantly. One little boy, no older than Lily, with a bald head from chemotherapy, sat cross-legged on the grass, too shy to approach. Liam guided Bolt over. The dog sniffed the boy's offered hand, and, in a move that made Liam's heart stop, he carefully lay down in front of the child, rolling onto his side to expose his belly, a universal canine gesture of trust and submission. The boy's face broke into a wide, gap-toothed grin, and he leaned forward, burying his face in Bolt's fur. The boy's mother, watching with tears in her eyes, snapped a picture. That single image became almost as iconic as the airport footage, speaking volumes about the dual nature of these animals, fierce protectors and gentle healers. Amidst this new routine of training and public relations, a low-priority case file landed on Liam's desk. It was a report from a patrol officer about a series of petty thefts from cargo holds at the airport's perimeter. Small, high-value electronics were going missing from shipments. It was a nuisance crime, but one detail caught Liam's eye. The security log showed no signs of forced entry, and internal cameras had been disabled not by hacking, but by a small, crude device that created a localized power drain, a blip in the system. It was sloppy, almost amateurish, compared to the high-tech espionage of the Parker case. But the method of creating a small, invisible blind spot nagged at Liam. It felt familiar in its principle. He decided to take Bolt for a walk around the reported theft sites, not expecting to find anything, but treating it as an informal training exercise. The area was a maze of containers and warehouses. Liam let Bolt off-leash to explore. They turned a corner into a secluded alley between two large warehouses. Bolt, who had been trotting casually, suddenly froze. His head snapped to the left, toward a ventilation grate at the base of one building. The easy-going posture was gone in an instant, replaced by the same focused rigidity Liam had seen in the training drill. He let out a soft, low growl, his eyes fixed on the grate. Liam's instincts went on high alert. This wasn't the alert for explosives or drugs. This was the anomalous threat alert. He approached slowly. He saw nothing at first, just a standard rusting grate. But then he noticed it. A tiny, almost invisible filament of wire, no thicker than human hair, ran from the edge of the grate and disappeared into a crack in the pavement. It was a tripwire, but not one connected to an explosive. It was a sensor, a primitive but effective early warning system. This wasn't just petty theft. This was an organized operation with counter-surveillance measures. The method was crude, but the thinking was sophisticated. They were creating their own blind spots, just on a smaller, criminal scale. "Good boy," Liam whispered to Bolt, his mind already racing. He called a fine into dispatch, requesting a full forensic team. The petty theft case had just been elevated. As he waited, looking down at the dog who was again the key to uncovering a hidden layer of danger, Liam realized the ripple effect of their airport ordeal was still spreading. It had changed them, sharpened them, and now it was leading them to new threats hiding in the unlikeliest of places. The world was full of hidden grates and invisible wires, and he was grateful, more than ever, to have a partner who could see them. The discovery of the tripwire transformed the dusty alley between the warehouses from a minor theft scene into focal point of a major operation. The forensic team arrived within minutes, their white suits a stark contrast to the grimy industrial backdrop. They worked with silent efficiency, documenting the nearly invisible filament. Liam stood back with Bolt, watching. The shepherd was calm now, but his eyes remained fixed on the ventilation grate, his body still humming with residual energy. He knew he had found something significant. Officer Garcia approached, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by focused intensity. "This changes everything, Liam. Petty thieves don't set up early warning systems. This is a professional setup." "Tell me about it," Liam replied, his gaze sweeping the roofline. "It's sloppy, but the thinking is advanced. They're using low-tech solutions to create high-tech blind spots. It means they're probably still close." The lead forensic tech walked over, holding a small evidence bag. It's homemade but effective. A simple magnetic switch connected to a pager motor. When the grate is moved, it sends a vibration signal. The range can't be more than a few hundred feet. Whoever is on the other end knows we're here. Liam's radio crackled. "Sergeant Carter, we've got a hit. The blueprints show a sublevel maintenance corridor under this complex. That grate is an access point." A tactical plan solidified in Liam's mind. The thieves were using the airport's own infrastructure against it. "I want a full tactical team to secure the perimeter. Garcia, you're with me. We're going down." Bolt, hearing the change in Liam's tone, stood at immediate attention. The team moved quickly, setting up a secure perimeter while Liam, Garcia, and two other officers prepared to breach the grate. They were joined by a technician with a compact, wheeled robot equipped with a camera. With a quiet, metallic screech, the grate was carefully pried open, revealing a dark, narrow shaft descending into blackness. A damp, musty smell wafted out. The robot was sent down first. On the tablet screen, they watched the camera feed as it emerged into a narrow, concrete-lined corridor, lit by dim, battery-powered work lights. The corridor was cluttered with discarded packing materials and empty water bottles. "This is their stash house," Garcia whispered, peering at the screen. "They've been down there for a while." Liam nodded. "They're using the airport's blind spots as their own private highway." He looked at Bolt. The dog was sniffing the air at the entrance of the shaft, his tail giving a slow, deliberate wag. He wasn't alerting to danger. He was tracking. The scent trail was fresh. The tactical team leader gave the signal. "Clear to proceed. We have the exterior secured." Liam took a deep breath. "Bolt, seek." The command was all the shepherd needed. He plunged into the darkness of the shaft, his powerful body navigating the descent with ease. Liam and Garcia followed, their tactical flashlights cutting beams through the gloom. The corridor stretched ahead, a long, straight line of shadows and dim light. They moved slowly, methodically, checking side passages. The place was a labyrinth, a forgotten world beneath the bustling airport. After about 50 yards, Bolt slowed, his nose pressed to the ground. He led them to a side room, its door heavy, sliding metal panels slightly ajar. Liam signaled for Garcia to take one side while he took the other. With a coordinated shove, they slid the door fully open. The room beyond was a makeshift command center. A bank of monitors, now dark, was set up on a folding table, wires snaking across the floor to a cluster of car batteries. Shelves lined the walls, filled with sorted stacks of stolen electronics. But it was what was on the central table that made Liam's blood run cold. Spread out was a detailed, hand-drawn map of the airport south terminal. Encircled in red was Gate B7. "It's not a coincidence," Garcia said, his voice hushed. "They were studying our site." Liam's mind raced. Were these thieves inspired by the notoriety of the location, or was there a more sinister connection? Before he could voice his theories, a noise echoed from deeper in the corridor, a faint scuffling sound. Bolt's head snapped up, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He was looking down the dark passageway, his body tense. "They're still here," Liam whispered. The team moved out of the room and continued down the main corridor, their movements now silent and precise. The corridor ended at a T-junction. Liam pointed left, and Garcia nodded, taking the right path with one other officer. Liam and Bolt went left. The passage here was narrower, the ceiling lower. Bolt led the way, his nose constantly working. They passed several small, empty rooms. Then, at the end of the passage, a sliver of light shone from under a closed door. Liam approached cautiously. He could hear faint, frantic movements from inside, the sound of someone packing in a hurry. He looked at Bolt and pointed to the door. The shepherd understood. He positioned himself to the side, ready to move the moment the door opened. Liam took a deep breath, then raised his foot and kicked the door hard. The flimsy lock shattered, and the door flew inward with crash. "Police! Don't move!" Liam shouted, sweeping the room with his flashlight. A single figure, a young man with a gaunt, terrified face, froze. He was surrounded by half-packed duffel bags. He held a laptop in his hands, poised to smash it on the floor. "Drop it. Now!" Liam commanded. The man hesitated, his eyes wide with panic. In that split second, Bolt took a single step forward and let out a deep, guttural bark that echoed in the small space. The sound was pure, primal authority. The man yelped, his nerves shattering. The laptop clattered to the concrete floor, unharmed. He threw his hands into the air. "Don't let him bite me. Please. I give up." As Garcia and the other officer arrived to secure the suspect, Liam looked around the room. It was a sleeping quarters with a cot and more maps pinned to the wall. These weren't just thieves. They were squatters living in the bowels of the airport. While the suspect was being read his rights, Liam's phone vibrated. It was a message from the intelligence unit. The preliminary interrogation of the two operatives from the Parker case had yielded a lead. The private intelligence firm they worked for was known to sometimes hire local, low-level criminal elements for logistical support. As Liam looked at the terrified young man in handcuffs, a chilling possibility began to form. What if this wasn't just a random theft ring? What if their presence here, under Gate B7, wasn't a coincidence? The hidden world beneath the airport was proving to be far more connected to the world above than anyone could have imagined. And once again, Bold had been the key to pulling back the curtain. The suspect, who identified himself as Carl Renner, was a far cry from the cold, professional operatives captured after the van chase. He was jittery, pale, and his eyes darted around the interrogation room as if expecting the walls to close in on him. He was a small-time electronics thief with a record of petty crimes, suddenly in way over his head. Liam observed him from behind the one-way mirror. While in the room, Officer Garcia leaned casually against the wall, letting the silence stretch and amplify Carl's anxiety. Bolt sat placidly in the corner of the observation room, but his attention was fixed on a man through the glass, his head tilted as if analyzing his scent and heartbeat from a distance. "Those maps, Carl," Garcia began, his voice deceptively calm. "The ones of Gate B7. You want to tell us why you were so interested in that specific spot?" "I told you, I don't know anything about that. I just found those maps." Carl's voice was a reedy whine. We were just taking some stuff. That's all. Phones, laptops, nothing big. Nothing big. Garcia pushed off the wall and placed his hands on the table. Leaning in, you had a hidden command center. You had tripwires. You were living in the walls of an international airport. That's not nothing big, Carl. That's a whole new level of ambition. Who are you working for? I work alone. It was my idea, he insisted, but the tremor in his hands betrayed him. He was scared of someone, or something far more than he was scared of the police. Liam spoke quietly into a microphone. Asked him about the ventilation system access near Gate B12, the one that was on your blueprint. Garcia relayed the question. Carl's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. I don't know what you're talking about. From the observation room, Liam watched Bolt. The dog had been still, but now he let out a very soft, almost inaudible whine, his nose pressing against the glass. He was reacting to the man's spike of fear, the chemical change in his scent that signaled a lie. It was an instinctual polygraph. He's lying about the access point, Liam said into the mic. Press him on it. Garcia didn't question the order. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. See, Carl, I think you do know. I think someone paid you to know. I think they gave you a job down there, something a little different from stealing smartphones. And I think you're terrified of what they'll do to you if you talk. The color drained from Carl's face. He started to shake, wrapping his arms around himself. I can't. You don't understand. They'll kill me. Who, Carl? Garcia's voice was firm but not unkind. Who will kill you? Give me a name. Help us help you. Tears welled in the young man's eyes. The facade was crumbling under the weight of his own fear and the relentless, quiet pressure of the interrogation. They never gave names. It was just a voice on an encrypted chat. A job. A one-time payment in cryptocurrency. What was the job? Garcia pressed. They wanted us to create a distraction. A big one. On that day. The day with the dogs and the little girl. The words tumbled out in a rush, as if saying them quickly would lessen their impact. In the observation room, Liam felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He stood up straighter, his full focus on the man in the interrogation room. What kind of distraction? Garcia asked, his own composure visibly strained. Smoke, Carl whispered, looking down at his hands. They wanted us to trigger a smoke bomb in the ventilation system near the gate. Not a fire, just smoke. Enough to cause panic, to pull security away, to create chaos. They said it was part of a corporate espionage test, a stress test of airport security. I swear, I didn't know about the little girl. I didn't know about any tracker. We were just supposed to release the smoke at a specific time. But you didn't, Garcia stated. Carl shook his head, a sob catching in his throat. No, we chickened out. When we saw the K-9 units coming through, we got spooked. We aborted. We never triggered the device. It's probably still down there, in the ductwork near Gate B12. The pieces slammed together in Liam's mind with the force of a physical blow. The men in the van, the tracker on Lily, were one part of the plan. Carl and his team were the other. The smoke bomb was meant to be the catalyst, the perfect diversion. In the panic of potential fire, security would have been overwhelmed, evacuations would have been chaotic, and the K-9 unit's strange behavior around the little girl might have been misinterpreted or outright ignored in the scramble. It would have been a perfect cover to either snatch Lily and Emily in confusion or to allow the van to get away cleanly. The entire operation had been a meticulously orchestrated symphony of misdirection, and only the failure of one minor movement, the dog's unwavering focus and Carl's cowardice, had caused a whole composition to fall apart. Liam keyed his radio, his voice urgent. We need a full EOD and hazmat sweep of the ventilation system around Gate B12 immediately. Tell them we have a report of an unexploded incendiary device. He then looked back at Bolt. The dog was still watching Carl, but his body had relaxed. The source of the tension had been identified. The truth pulled into the light. The shepherd's work here was done. He had helped them find not just a thief, but a critical thread in the tapestry of the conspiracy. Garcia left the interrogation room and joined Liam behind the mirror. "A smoke bomb," he muttered, running a hand over his face. "It makes sense. It's the perfect non-lethal diversion. In that chaos, they could have done anything." Liam nodded, his gaze still fixed on the sobbing Carl Renner. "He's small fish, a pawn, but he just gave us a crucial look at the game board. This wasn't just about tracking and data theft. This was an active extraction or abduction plan. They were going to take them right out of the airport during the panic." The revelation elevated the Parker case to an even higher level of severity. It was no longer just espionage. It was attempted kidnapping on U.S. soil with ties to a sophisticated international entity. The intelligence from the captured operatives, combined with Carl's confession, will provide federal authorities with a much clearer picture of the network they were dealing with. Later that evening, as Liam prepared to leave the station, his captain called him into his office. "The feds are taking over the Parker case completely, Liam. And this new angle with the smoke bomb? They're ecstatic. It's the concrete link they needed between the low-level logistics and the high-level operatives. Your work, and that dog of yours, just cracked this thing wide open." Liam accepted the praise with a nod, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought of Emily and Lily, safe in their new lives, completely unaware of how close they had come to an even darker fate. He thought of Carl, a foolish young man whose life was now irrevocably broken because he took a job from a voice on the internet. Walking out to his car with Bolt trotting beside him, the cool night air felt heavy with the weight of the day's revelations. The world was a web of interconnected plots and hidden dangers, some vast and international, some small and criminal. But as he opened the car door for Bolt, who jumped in and settled into the passenger seat with a contented sigh, Liam felt a familiar sense of purpose settle over him. It was his job and Bolt's to untangle those webs, one thread at a time, no matter how deeply they were hidden. The following week was a whirlwind of federal agents, sealed indictments, and closed-door briefings. The Seattle PD and Liam's unit in particular became a temporary annex of a much larger, shadowy machinery of national security. Men and women in dark suits moved through the precinct with quiet authority. They debriefed Liam for hours, their questions precise and exhaustive. They were particularly interested in Bolt's behavior, not just as an anecdote, but as data. They recorded Liam's descriptions of the dog's alerts, his posture, the subtleties of his growls, with the intensity of scientists documenting a new natural phenomenon. Liam cooperated fully, but the process was draining. It felt like dissecting a miracle until it became just a series of biological and environmental reactions. These agents dealt in a world of signals intelligence and cyber warfare. The concept of the dog's instinct being a critical piece of their puzzle was both an unsettling anomaly and a tantalizing new asset. One of the senior agents, a woman with sharp eyes named Fletcher, summed it up. "Your dog, Sergeant Carter, represents a nonlinear variable. He operates outside the predictive models our adversaries use. They can hack our networks and spoof our sensors, but they can't hack a dog's instinct. It's a vulnerability in their system that they never accounted for." It was the highest form of praise Liam had ever heard, yet it felt cold and clinical. They saw Bolt as a tool, an asset. They didn't see the partner who slept at the foot of his bed, who got excited when Liam picked up his favorite tennis ball, who comforted him after a hard day with a simple, warm presence. The information from Carl Renner and the two captured operatives was cross-referenced with other intelligence. The private intelligence firm, Aegis Solutions, was a deniable proxy for a foreign government. Their goal had been to acquire Daniel Parker's communication chip and eliminate his family. The tracker was a linchpin, and the aborted smoke bomb was a planned curtain for the final, brutal act. The failure of the operation, triggered by Bolt's inexplicable focus, had exposed a cell and disrupted a multi-million-dollar intelligence-gathering operation. As the federal case solidified, the external pressure on Liam's unit began to ease. The news cycles moved on. The flood of mail slowed. The unit was settling back into a rhythm, albeit a forever altered one. One rainy Tuesday evening, long after his shift had ended, Liam found himself alone in the K-9 unit's common room. The lights were dim. The only sound the steady patter of rain and the soft, rhythmic snoring of Bolt, stretched out on his favorite dog bed. Liam scrolled through the official, redacted report on his tablet. The dry, legal language described the saving of 2 lives and the thwarting of a major threat. It was all there in black and white, but it felt incomplete. He looked at Bolt, at the peaceful rise and fall of his chest. In the quiet of the room, the memory of that day played back not as a sequence of tactical decisions, but as a series of emotional impressions. The terrifying confusion in Lily's eyes, the raw sound of Emily's scream, the feel of the cold, heavy toy in his hand, and through it all, the constant, unwavering presence of the dog, now sleeping so soundly beside him. He thought about the bond they shared. It wasn't just about training and commands. It was a language that existed beneath words, a synchronicity built on thousands of hours of shared experiences. He trusted Bolt with his life, and he knew that Bolt trusted him with his. The dog didn't obey him because of a hierarchy. He worked with him because of a partnership. He had chosen to protect the girl because his instinct, his very nature, aligned with his training and his bond with Liam. It was a beautiful, complex alchemy that the federal report could never capture. Liam stood up and walked over the bulletin board, to the letter from a mother in Minnesota. Asterisk, you showed him that true strength is gentle. Asterisk, that was closer to the truth. The strength in the terminal wasn't in the barking or the bared teeth. It was in the circle of protection, the deliberate choice to shield rather than attack. It was in the gentle nuzzle to a terrified child hand. Bolt's greatest power wasn't his bite, it was his heart. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a text from Emily, sent through the secure channel the feds had set up. Asterisk, Lily lost her first tooth today. She told the tooth fairy that she wants the money to buy a big box of dog treats. She hasn't forgotten. We never will. Thank you for everything. E asterisk. Liam felt a smile spread across his face, warm and genuine. This was the report that mattered. This was the data that was worth more than any intelligence briefing. A little girl in a safe place, thinking about a dog who saved her. He typed back a simple reply. Asterisk, tell her Bolt says thank you in advance. Take care of each other. Asterisk, he walked back to his sleeping partner and knelt down, not to give command, but simply to be near him. He rested a hand on Bolt's side, feeling the solid, living warmth, the steady heartbeat. The dog stirred, opened one eye and gave a slow, contented wag of his tail before sighing and settling back into sleep. In that moment, Liam understood the full weight and the full privilege of his badge. It wasn't just about enforcing the law. It was about guarding the fragile, precious things, a child's smile, a mother's hope, the simple, trusting bond between a human and an animal. The world was full of darkness and complexity, of hidden grates and invisible wires, of men in black vans and suits who saw people and dogs as assets and variables. But it was also full of light. And as Liam sat on the floor in the quiet, rain-soaked night, his hand on his sleeping friend, he knew with absolute clarity that his purpose was to stand with this incredible creature at his side and fight for that light. However, they could, for as long as they could. A year later, the memory of the miracle at Seattle-Tacoma had woven itself into the city's fabric. It was no longer breaking news, but local legend. On the anniversary, a small ceremony was held in the South Terminal's newly dedicated Guardian's Garden. The quiet atrium featured a reflecting pool, benches, and a life-size bronze statue at its center. The statue showed a vigilant German shepherd sitting tall. A young girl rested her hand trustingly on his back. The plaque read, in gratitude, for the unseen guardians among us. Liam and Bolt were guests of honor. As the mayor spoke about courage and community, Liam stood at attention, Bolt sitting perfectly at heel beside him. The dog seemed to understand the occasion's solemnity, his ears perked, his gaze calm but aware. He was older now, a touch of gray dusting his muzzle, but his eyes held the same keen intelligence. Liam's mind drifted during the speeches. He thought of the past year. The federal case against Aegis Solutions continued, a complex web of international law. But the responsible cell was dismantled. The advanced training protocols developed from their experience were now being adopted nationwide, changing how K-9 teams were integrated into security. His unit had received a presidential citation, but these accolades felt distant. What felt real were the smaller changes. The way new officers looked at Bolt with awe and respect. The continued letters from children inspired to become police officers or vets. The unshakable bond between him and his partner, a bond that needed no words. After the ceremony, a young boy broke from his parents and approached Bolt, his steps hesitant. Liam nodded. Bolt lowered his head, sniffing the boy's fingers before giving a gentle lick. The boy's nervousness melted into a radiant smile. It was a scene that had repeated all year. Bolt had become more than a police dog. He was a bridge, a symbol of safety a child could understand. Later, Liam and Bolt walked through a park overlooking the city. It was their ritual, a time to decompress. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows. Bolt trotted ahead, exploring familiar scents with the leisurely pace of a veteran. Liam watched him, a profound peace settling over him. The anxiety that had plagued him was gone, replaced by resilient trust. He thought of Emily and Lily, living quietly somewhere. He hoped Lily was laughing in a schoolyard, her memories softened by time and the knowledge she was protected. He hoped Emily had found peace. Their story was a closed chapter, but its lessons were etched on his soul. Bolt circled back, dropping a stick at his feet, tail wagging. Liam laughed, throwing it into the field. The shepherd bounded after it, a joyful blur against the green grass. This was a legacy, not in statues or citations, but in the daily work, in a child's trust, in the simple joy of a retrieved stick, in knowing they had made a difference, reminding a city of the power of selfless courage. Bolt returned with the stick, panting enthusiastically. Liam knelt, wrapping his arms around the dog's powerful neck, burying his face in familiar fur. "Good boy, Bolt," he whispered, his voice thick with pride, gratitude, and a love that transcended species. "You're the best partner a man could ever have." The dog leaned into the hug, his tail sweeping the grass in a wide, happy arc. He didn't need a ceremony. His handler's approval, the joy of the chase, the safety of his pack, this was everything. As the sun dipped below the skyline, painting the sky in orange and purple, man and dog turned for home. They walked side by side, their silhouettes merging into one. The city below glittered, a vast organism of light and shadow, of joy and sorrow, of visible paths and hidden dangers. But for Liam and Bolt, the path was clear. They would walk it together, as always, one step at a time, a handler and his dog, partners in a world they were committed to protecting. Their story was a legend, but for them, it was just a prelude to the next chapter, the next patrol, the next silent communication that passed between them in a glance. They were a team, and as long as they had each other, they were ready. If stories like this touch your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Bonds Unspoken. Every click helps us share more incredible moments that celebrate the bond between humans and animals. And be sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that reminds us what true loyalty feels like.